Welcome back, everyone, to another interview here at Reimagine 2020 V4. I'm your host, Roshan. I'm going to be one of your guest hosts for Reimagine. And yes, we're all dressed up in these costumes for a Halloween theme. Very excited here to be joined by Evan Shapiro, CEO and co-founder of O1 Labs. Evan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so how have the past couple months been for you? You know, what are some of the things that you've sort of seen that you think will affect the crypto industry in general? You know, are there any couple of things you look for in particular?
Yeah, let's see. It's been an exciting project for us, particularly because we're getting towards mainnet. But more broadly, like I think like I've been starting to I guess two things have been going on for me in particular. One is like I've been starting to kind of understand DeFi and where the limitations are and where the parts are that could make it real, because we've been interested in that as well. And the other one, this is a little more, I guess, technical, but like I've been really digging into learning about the connections between all the layer twos and how you can like start thinking about them like more from a more meta perspective of how they're all related to each other. And I don't know, like my take on it is that layer twos are going to have to be pretty close to layer ones to have all the right guarantees. They're going to have their own validators. They're going to like have their own decentralization. And I started to think through things from that lens, which has been interesting for me to think about.
Yeah, do you think, you know, when we talk about the different stacks or the different layers, do you think that some layer two applications have you know, better usability, basically? Like the question I would sort of ask you is, you know, in the traditional world, when we see things even outside of crypto and blockchain, there's big players like big banks and a lot of the smaller, let's say, fintech companies still use them to process. You know, I could maybe call the banks like layer one, but then you have things like Cash App, different things like that. I would compare it to that, where sort of more layer two, you know, it's happening at a lower level. It's not like bank to bank or anything like that, you know, person to person. So how do you sort of, you know, what do you see the advantages and disadvantages, basically?
Yeah, totally. I think, well, I feel like each layer two has its own trade-off space that it's like operating within. Like on the one hand, you can have something like optimistic rollups, which doesn't require any snarks, but you have to put up some capital for it to work. And then there's like some challenging aspect to it that's like a little more complicated. And then you have something like ZK Sync, where they're still posting all the call data to the chain. And there's some more complexity there because of the snarks. I feel like it's a little too early, honestly. I mean, I guess I view all these things as they're a little different, I think, than like banks or like a Cash App, because they're computational platforms and they're layers of that platform. And what it's such an early time for, like, if you're a developer, like you're going to choose between one of these solutions to build your app on. I think it's still a very hard choice, and I think that the layer twos as they are today will have to change in order to make that an easier choice. But I'm curious, as in as they change, will they just become layer ones, or will developers still have to think through the trade-off space of layer twos?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting to get your personal take on this, because I think it's a little more unique than what we traditionally see in the crypto world. And what I mean by that is, you know, things like the Bitcoin blockchain, or even enterprise blockchain. You know, I feel like a lot of people talk about, you know, how the longest chain guarantees things like security and also reliability, right? Bitcoin, the longest chain, keeping blockchains large, I would say. You know, a lot of people, that's why Bitcoin, right, layer one doesn't scale well. So why do you think like, I'm trying to ask you, you know, why do you think blockchain should be smaller in size? Is it for because you believe in it will improve the usability, or is it because you believe that maybe more people could have access to it? I don't want to go to Bitcoin, but I'll go to Bitcoin. Basically, not everyone can mine Bitcoin, right? Very computationally expensive. Maybe that wasn't what it was built for in the beginning, but that is the case now. So yeah, maybe a couple of your thoughts there, because I just think you have a unique take on this for sure.
Yes. I think what really got me interested in the space and where I started kind of coming into it was, I think that cryptocurrency's real strength is that like it's something that kind of levels the playing field and everyone could get access to it and everyone can use it. And this is what's led us to develop Mina, is that we can have this cryptocurrency that has a very small blockchain that everyone can connect to and everyone can use. And it doesn't have the traditional hurdles of a very large, ever-growing blockchain. And this is intimately connected to the layer 2 stuff we were just talking about, because I think the layer 2 stuff is kind of trying to patch the existing tech to work, even though it has like this big blockchain problem. Whereas with Mina, we just made a whole new layer 1 to solve it directly.
Yeah, so can you get into a little more about how things are going with Mina, and where have you seen the most growth? It can be by usage, but kind of by sector, like what people are using it for, or it can also be geographically, because I've seen that certain tokens, depending on their nature, actually the geography is really important. I mean, a lot of these protocols are open source, decentralized, but depending on where you are, it can limit your access and yeah, basically what you might use it for. Maybe in some third world countries, they can't really afford to use Bitcoin, or they don't really care to, right? They just need something better, actually usable. So yeah, that's kind of my question. Like, where have you seen?
I think the answer is related to geography. We're still pre-launch, but we've been bringing folks onto our testnet to run nodes and be node operators and be block producers. And we've seen so that's like the main thing we've been going after so far, and the main place we've seen growth. We've seen people show up really from all over the world. I want to say we have I want to say it's like 180 different people from 180 countries. People from 180 different countries have like applied for our Genesis like block producer program, and major growth in I think Russia is like the biggest one. We have a lot of people from Russia that are like really interested in getting engaged with the project, but really everywhere. Just to mention Russia is like to sell it short, versus also US and China and Europe and Korea, and I could go on.
So when is we'll get into like two things here. One, when is Mina launching, and two, you recently went through. I believe you guys had a good strategic fundraise that you recently closed. So, what are you guys the most focused on right now? You don't have to get too detailed, but I'm kind of interested to see what are you specifically trying to use the majority of the funding for. Everyone has a different take in the space of where they kind of use that funding, right? Is it to build communities and node operators, like you're saying, or yeah, reduce the size of blockchains, different things like that. So just you don't have to get too detailed, but I'm curious to know.
Yeah, the main goal of the fundraise was strategic for us. So it was really important to us that we are able to make this project properly and really global. But we're missing having really good partners in Asia. And this was our approach to making that happen, so that we can start working with those partners and growing the presence of Mina all over the world and in Asia, because we know that's a locale where people really are starting to get engaged with cryptocurrency. We want to make sure Mina is part of that.
And was this, well, obviously the whole virtual situation, COVID situation was not planned, but is this I think it's an interesting time period that you're trying to launch soon, because a lot of people, I would say, these things aren't that strange to them anymore. So do you think that that sort of just contributes to the overall space? You know, will people use cryptocurrency and other types of tokens and not look back? Like, why would you go back, right?
You mean versus like traditional fiat
Yes,
and
I mean like traditional fiat. You know, I'm here. You know, I had the pleasure of speaking with you here today on Zoom. But you know, I don't know where you are in the world, but nonetheless, if you were in, just because of your geography, it would take like 3 days for me to send you money. But I can
oh, yeah.
talk to you whenever I want. It's really weird to me. Uh, Zoom calls might, you know, for example, Zoom calls might be better than actual physical meetings when I have more quality conversation. So yeah, do you think we'll ever go back? Like, do you think there's a tipping point happening right now, or is just exponential interest? I think there's a difference.
No, I think there is a tipping point. I don't think we are quite there yet, but I think that what technology has done in the past and what it's going to do here is once something is switched over to a technical like modular solution, it's going to be a technical modular solution for like the, you know, going forward from that point. And I think we're starting to see that, like, this is me talking more macro now with Bitcoin. And I think there's like kind of the hints of it starting to happen with some of the more programmable money stuff, but it's still very early. But definitely something to be excited about, because like once it happens, you don't go backwards at that point. Even if like governments and states like are heavily involved, which they probably will be, it's still going to be a very different world than like the one that we are in today.
Yeah, and are there going to be a good amount of opportunities, let's say, for developers to get involved, or are you looking more for people to kind of run their own node all over the world? I think there's maybe two approaches depending on how you want to design some of these. You know, do you want to bake it into the code, or do you want actual physical nodes? I think you can. Does that make sense? You can, something like security or scalability, you can bake it in two different ways. I'm trying to get a sense of which one you're focused on.
Yeah, so I'll touch on developers in a sec, but yeah, like I feel like at the end of the day, these protocols are really just proxies for people, like people in organizations and institutions. So it's really important that as much as protocol advancements can help with the security guarantees you get, like with Mina, the protocol is very cheap to run, very small, so anyone can run it on just a regular device. At the end of the day, what's really important is the people behind it. So we've been extra focused on building these community of block producers, because we know that like for us, we feel like you need like, you know, hundreds or thousands of people operating a network for it to be really decentralized.
Okay, yeah, thanks for answering that. I'm just curious. Do you think that Facebook's token will ever be launched? Because I'm hearing some similar ideas, but they actually kind of struggle with the reverse thing, right? They have all the partners, and they have all the infrastructure and funding, arguably, but maybe they have no community and a lot of regulatory hurdles, like no one's running nodes, but you know, it's the companies, not the people. So, you know, do you think that do you think that crypto native projects like yourself that are trying to build the community from the ground up, you know, have an edge? Might not matter how much money or traditional establishment these other companies have.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like in some ways, like Mina is like anti-Libra, or like whatever they're gonna change if they do.
Facebook, if
Like,
you're listening, no, I'm just kidding.
but like it's like we're gonna have like 100 nodes that like owned by like huge corporations in Silicon Valley, like all meeting to like in this council to like decide the fate of like world finance. Pretty dystopian, if you ask me. So yeah, I think there is definitely an edge. Like I think what's been, you know, like I think that what Facebook and Libra saw was like, there's not a good way to scale this stuff. Let's just like, you know, let's just not like we'll decentralize it, but like, you know, not really. Let's just like get something out that like kind of works and like call it a day, and we'll have it be really scalable. Whereas the tech we have with Mina lets you have decentralization and scale, which is like, we think the key, and will let us bring on all these large community, which has been starting to happen, and what I'm most excited about. Like the tech is one thing, but the community behind it is essential.
Yeah, I think it's really important. You said that. I was talking to some other people today, and they honestly mentioned the same thing. You know, they said that the community is what drives some of these prices up. The community is what is unique to the space of how people get in, how you learn about it. Nothing like the traditional world. You have all these weird other levers, right? That most traditional companies wouldn't start with, but you got to start with that here. Staying with the Halloween theme, what I do want to ask you about is what is your scariest story that you had so far in crypto? It could be when you got in, or like kind of what you've dealt with in your time here, in your continued time in the space. All of us who are in it.
Man, so one comes to mind, which is that like until recently we've only been Mina for a little bit now. Before that we were Coda.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that was due to a lawsuit from R3, which led us to having to do a rebrand. That maybe so far one of the scariest things getting a lawsuit as a company having to decide to do a rebrand is top of the list. Scary stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you don't have to get too much in the details, but going through that process, are you still bullish, let's say, on the regulatory, like, do you believe the regulations in place are good enough for crypto, or are they still like far behind? Is it a nascent world that hasn't caught up? But that's probably a big process to rebrand everything and launch. But it's unique. You have a unique perspective and story now.
Yeah. I mean, I think it made us think about like, oh, like, are we Coda, or are like we this like really small blockchain, and like that's what's important to us? And like, we figured it out. Like the brand on top is just like our best way of sharing like the ideas that it's important to us. And I think like it was in some ways a good thing because it let us like really think about who we are and how to express ourselves. Broader, more regulatory wise, like this isn't from like the rebranding and stuff, but like I mean I think this is just a general sentiment. Like there needs to be more clarity, especially from the U.S. Like we're all doing the best we can, but it's such an early time for the space.
Yeah, I see depending on the jurisdiction and geography, again, I see the laws changing all the time. And then I see in the US, like, we're trying to launch the USDC, or have it at a higher level where banks are providing liquidity and different things like that. But yeah, there's a lot of weird things happening in the world right now, especially with the election. Do you think that anything in blockchain and crypto can actually help with the election? We don't know when they would actually maybe use the technology, but how can we instill belief in people in a time like this? Because there's a lot of that foundation in crypto and blockchain, just verifying what you believe. I feel like a lot of people are kind of a little down in this time. They don't know what to think, just with everything, right? But to
Yeah.
sum it up, I would say, can we bring this underlying trust factor that we have in the space to the general people? Like, how would you get people in for that? How would you sell them on that?
So I think yes, but I don't know if I want to apply it to like the U.S. election quite yet. Like I think the key is the thing that I've been thinking about is like we have these computers now, we have the internet. It's like this amazing technology, but each computer, each company is like a little island, and you have to like kind of default back to like handshake deals of what trust means for that really to work. And what that really turns into is like drawn out legal battles with like lobbyists and legislators. And it's like at some point it's like, well, I'm just interacting with like this entity behind the screen that like is going to do something, and I don't know really what it is. Hopefully it doesn't do anything too bad. And I think that just like the opacity of these systems we deal with is becoming an issue, and will increasingly do so as these systems get more powerful. And that's where I think crypto and ZK snarks especially can start having an effect, that these systems can start bringing some trust back to systems that haven't been able to express primitives and notions of trust before. Like once you have a state machine, which is really what a cryptocurrency is, that has primitives around privacy and trust, we can start thinking of building systems that go beyond the limitations of systems today. And I think one day that will be voting. And also it'll be regulations on companies. It'll also be proving to your users that you're actually a responsible entity. I think this is going to start happening soon in like the crypto native landscape for proving things to chains. But what I'm really excited for is for that to start kind of going out to the broader internet and kind of putting the trust primitive back into like our interactions.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, especially what you just said, your last sentence, like put the trust back into maybe the things we believe in, because as the progression of the internet, different broader macro things have progressed. Even if you compare it to newspapers, the trust factor has changed, right? You don't need to believe what's written anymore. You can kind of verify that yourself in a consensus way. I would say that's why crypto Twitter, I'm a big fan. A lot of people can learn that way. Ideas get shared all the time. And honestly, I think a lot of things don't get the credit they actually deserve, right? Whether it's institutions getting in or companies like PayPal saying like, we're going to integrate this into their actual interface. And then maybe what you just said can actually come true, which is you're sending transactions right now behind the scenes. It's not actually happening on chain, quote unquote, right? There is, I think, that a lot of value when things actually do happen on chain. They're verifiable, they're kind of stamped. What the last question I kind of wanted to ask you, maybe I'll get a little technical because we talked a lot about your background and different things like that. I think that's great because for a lot of our viewers out there, one of our main goals is to help them really understand the value and slowly get in. Then you can go on a path, be a developer, different things like that. What I want to ask you is, Bitcoin is also going through a lot of upgrades, a lot more privacy focused upgrades are coming to Bitcoin. And when you compare that to things like ZK Snarks, do you see what's the role for privacy focused coins as these, I'll just say, larger chains upgrade their security? Do we need a blend, or can we actually, can completely privacy focused coins, going to the mainstream, or is it like too much? The government might never accept that, right? But maybe something pseudo anonymous. I talked a lot, but
Yeah,
I'll let you respond.
I guess like part one is like Bitcoin is a very slow moving something, and we'll see whatever happens when it happens. In general, with me, let me think for a second. This is a good question. Yes, I think that like one good place to start with this is to think about what kind of privacy guarantees we have today. Because right now I have, we have bank accounts, and the bank accounts are, not private to my bank, but at least not literally everyone in the world is looking at my bank account.
Fair enough.
I like not knowing, everyone knowing that. I don't know, like, how big companies would you try to exploit me on information, for example. But like, I think we at least want to start there with crypto. Like, let's create something where not everyone, literally everyone in the world, can look at the blockchain and see every transaction anyone's ever done. That is like a privacy disaster. I think when it comes to like governments and beyond that, like one thing that's pretty cool about zero knowledge proofs is you can have blended models of privacy. So I can prove, for example, that I'm only interacting with approved entities, that I am reporting all my transactions, especially like, things that relate to income and capital gains. So I can report those things with zero knowledge proof while still retaining the privacy guarantees I want to have generally. So I think we're like a little far off from that, but like, I think that like, it's not like all or none. It's like we can have a blended model, which allows, I think, everyone to be happy with the system.
I like zero. I want to see the application of zero knowledge proofs into more of the mainstream items. I was talking to a couple of students out in London, KCL Blockchain. I'll give them a shout out. But what they were discussing was a lot of high. I'll say, what am I trying to say? like for streetwear, not streetwear, but like I'll say exclusive items, like basically digital art, verifying the authenticity of the art. They're trying to find a way to use zero knowledge proofs where you could verify that you kind of had the ownership of very high valuable art piece, but you wouldn't exactly know the exact person between who actually owned that art. So I want to see more applications apply zero knowledge proof specifically, because I really like your point there, where that is a good blend where it's like you don't need to know anymore if you can prove it with code. Like nowadays in our world, KYC, all these different other things, there's a lot of verification. It's very slow, and you don't actually control, you don't control most of it, right? Credit ratings, all these different agencies. So I'll ask you one last question to wrap this up, and that will be, what are you most excited about going forward in the future? You know, like the DeFi craze was crazy. Maybe it's still happening. I don't see that many people talking about farming and different things like that, but where do you think we'll end off in the world? Let's say like two months from now, ending 2020.
Oh, let's see. Well, okay. I guess what I'm most excited or is kind of following off what you last mentioned, which is like this zero knowledge proof stuff. I think that one consequence of like the current DeFi craze and all the other things going on in crypto right now is people are going to start to see that the solution here is already there. It's zero knowledge proofs. That's how we can start getting people's information onto chains so that they can start interacting with them in more serious ways without actually compromising privacy in the process. Things like putting your credit history online, things like doing KYC more anonymously. I am very excited for that to happen, but I don't think it's going to happen in the next 2 months, but I do think it could happen next year, which is what we're trying to do. Now we're going to be soon launching some sort of developer program for people building these kinds of applications on Mina. In 2 months, I just kind of hope that, you know, like things are in a good place with the pandemic and the election is brought to a close in a sane way. I have simple hopes for the end of 2020. I'll stick with those.
Hey, simple enough. Evan, thank you so much for joining. Thanks for your time. Excited to see the launch of Mina. Everyone, I'm your host, Roshan, and I'll let you all tune back in to another interview at Reimagine 2020 V4. Thank you.